Hi friends, hope you are doing fine. I'm Dr. Ganguly. Welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to discuss about part-time PhD. And this is a topic of great interest to many people who are working in companies, national labs, research institutes, or even in colleges and universities. And these people may not have a PhD yet. They may have a master's degree and they want to do a PhD. So is it possible to do the PhD without leaving their current job? Because leaving their current job would require a substantial loss in terms of their salary and so on, and sometimes people have families, so it's not an easy decision to make. So let's look at this problem. And before I begin, I will tell you that there are many top researchers in any country, especially in national labs, in important programs in the country and so on, who have done this kind of part-time PhD. And so these people play a huge role in transferring knowledge from the university system to the corporate and the national lab system. So essentially one of the ways universities can move knowledge or impart knowledge to people in industry and to people in national labs directly is to encourage this particular part-time PhD program. Now, sometimes people with bachelor's degree may also be able to do such a program, but I would caution them because generally it's a better idea to have a master's degree before you do this PhD, because part-time PhD requires a lot of maturity and self-discipline, and typically I found that people who have only done a bachelor's degree sometimes have a problem with that. It's better if you have a master's degree. So that's something which I think, and again your mileage may vary in this problem. So let's first look at the process of admission. So generally there is a separate admission process in most universities for part-time PhDs, and this is sometimes known as a sponsored research program or a sponsored student, or sometimes it is known as an external research program, sometimes it is known as a quality improvement program, and so on. So essentially different universities, different countries run different systems through which people can come, and essentially what happens is that the selection, the interview processes are somewhat different from that of a typical student, but there are similarities of course out there. You are going to be compared with the same pool of students who are regularly applying to the PhD program. So essentially if there is a written test, you have to take the written test. If there is an interview process, you have to go through the interview process. Sometime if GATE or GRE or any exam is required, you have to give these exams also. So keep these things in mind. Now the important thing in any interview process is to focus on the fundamentals, because most of the time, as I mentioned in some previous videos, the professors don't prepare for these interviews. So what they do is they use their knowledge of the basic courses they teach in class to ask questions, and essentially the knowledge which is right there in front of their mind is the things which are fundamental to a subject. So if you're talking of solid mechanics, they're likely to ask you about things related to stress, strain, Mohr circle, principal stress, and so on. If you're talking of fluid mechanics, they may ask you about the continuity equation, the Bernoulli equation, the equation of state, momentum equations, and such things. So again, keep such things in mind, that the basic concepts are going to be more important than the very advanced and esoteric concepts in the field. Now the issue with admission is that the selection of the supervisor or advisor is very critical here. You need to find a PhD advisor who is good at guiding external research candidates, and essentially these are typically persons who are highly motivated and who also have some level of maturity and who have had some experience. So it is always a good idea to go for a professor who has some experience in the field, or a senior professor. This will certainly help the case in most situations, because generally what happens is that the external or part-time PhD candidates are somewhat older people, and therefore it is easier to work in a system where you have an older guide. Now again, there may be young superstars who may be willing to guide you, but then they may have different expectations in terms of a lot of journal papers and so on. So that's something you need to keep in mind. Now let's look at the other things. The first thing you need to do is coursework, and most PhD programs will require you to do some courses. So essentially there is something like a research training program which your supervisor is going to give you, maybe 4 courses, maybe 6 courses, maybe 10 courses, as the case may be in your university. And essentially you have to diligently do this program and get a reasonable GPA to continue forward for the PhD. Then there is going to be a comprehensive exam and so on. Now sometimes there is a written qualifier also. Now essentially do remember that you are going to directly compete with students who are recently done their degree. So essentially these guys may have just done their bachelor's degree, their master's degree, and have come immediately to the universities. So often their fundamentals will be very fresh in their mind, and they are going to do a pretty good job as far as the coursework is concerned. So you will have to work very hard here. So my suggestion is to take less courses than most people take. So if you see most people are taking 5 courses a semester, maybe you take 3 courses a semester or something like that, and try to take as less number of courses as possible. So take the minimum number of courses which are required in the research training program, and pick every course very carefully so that each course is very useful for your research. Don't take random courses like sometimes the other students do, and for them it is fine because they are essentially learning. They have all the time, they have the next 4, 5, 6 years in front of them, and they can spend a lot of time in doing this kind of study and research. Now the next person who is very important for you is your co-advisor or co-supervisor. So in many cases you are going to have a PhD supervisor also present in your own research lab, company, university, as the case may be, and this may be a local PhD person. So essentially many people are willing to sign up for being a co-PhD supervisor because they like to put this in their resume. But do remember that there are 2 types of co-supervisor. There are dormant ones and active ones. And dormant ones are very dangerous for part-time PhD students, because if this supervisor is not interested in doing research, in publishing papers every now and then and so on, they are going to be very little help to you. They are going to have very less interest in your research problem, and they are not going to be able to help you in any way. So essentially this is going to be a big problem for you, because you not only need help in your research, you also need help in motivation. You need help from some people about what directions to take when you are stuck on some problem and so on. So again, you need to leverage your industrial background or wherever you are to help you in your research. Now the next issue is that of self-discipline, and this is one of the most important things for a part-time PhD student, is that they have to do their work, they have to satisfy their day boss, who will be pretty tough on them, their manager, and then they have to satisfy the requirements of this PhD program. So again, this requires this person have a lot of self-discipline. He should be able to work during the evenings, during the weekends, miss out on many family functions, get-togethers, and so on. So there is a lot of sacrifice involved in doing a part-time PhD. So even before you get into this program, make sure that you have figured out, you have talked with your family, with your wife or husband, as the case may be, about if this kind of situation is possible, if they are amenable to your spending so much time in doing research during the weekends and so on. Now, one loophole I can think of is that in some cases where the students are able to actually link a problem in their own research lab to a PhD problem, and this is often possible for students who are working in national labs or who are working in research facilities of companies, or I should say corporate research. So in these situations it is possible for people to actually link their PhD problem and their work problem, and in these cases the PhDs can be done quite well. And these are some of the PhDs which are the best as far as the external PhDs are concerned, because you can combine the facilities, many things which are available in the research lab with the academic rigor and training of the university. So for example, if you are somebody who has access to flight test facilities or wind tunnel test facilities and so on, then that can certainly be of great advantage to you as far as your PhD is concerned. Now the next issue is that of communication, and I would say regular communication is extremely important for the part-time PhD. You need to make sure that you meet with your supervisor once a week, or certainly at least once every 2 weeks, because you are often not present there. And so if you are not interacting with your supervisor, he or she may not even remember about your existence. So that can be very deleterious for your PhD problem. Also, make sure that every month or so you make a small presentation to your supervisors about the progress you have made, or even the lack of progress you have made, and maybe you can ask them for their feedback. So keep a record of all these things so that you are making progress in the right direction. Now, point number 5 is conference and journal papers. So I know, of course, journal papers are very important for PhDs, but I would say for external candidates, conference papers also play a big role, because what happens with conference papers is that they have clear-cut deadlines. And so if you write an abstract for a conference paper, you will generally end up with an actual paper, and you'll go and present the paper there. You'll also write the paper, so you have some documentation at the end of the year. Maybe you wrote one conference paper. In 3 years you wrote 3 conference paper, and this kind of material can give you enough material to actually come up with a thesis after some time. Now, do remember that you will have to send your thesis to referees, but also remember that you can choose referees. You can choose referees who are of more applied nature. You can choose a bunch of referees who work in industrial research labs also and have PhDs. And so it can happen that you may have research which is more applied in nature, and therefore you may have published a lot of your work in conference papers and still get a PhD. And this is something which often happens for many of the top people who are there in the research and development field and who have got their part-time PhD. Remember, the PhD is given for your thesis, so you don't need to be too obsessed with journal papers at this stage. What I would suggest is target writing 1 or 2 journal papers if you're doing a part-time PhD, and focus on actually doing the work which is required to do the PhD. So in many cases, part-time PhDs are able to leverage experimental facilities in their lab to come up with better PhD thesis and better papers. So in case they may even write 1 or 2 papers, their papers may be gems compared to the 5 or 10 papers written by people who are completely theoretical and computational and do not have any experimental work backing their research. So this was my take on part-time PhD. I hope you benefited from this video, and I will see you in a video sometime soon. See you then.